While the car market correction is well underway, there are a few selected models for which price trends didn't turn down. Among these models are a few V12 Ferraris. The 599 and F12 appear to be immune to the market trend and a decent way to avoid the correction. However, also these markets contain some emerging risks that you need to be aware of. There are no full safe havens here, and this definitely applies to the rest of the V12 market. If we look at the Lusso, FF, or even the A12, we can see that price trends turn down. In this video we'll have a look at the modern V12 market, check out the models that seem to be immune to the market trend and the ones that followed the market trend. Over here we have the US market in January, split by the V12 models. Looking at the bottom of the graph, we can see that the FF is the cheapest way to get a V12. Prices start at $125,000. This is followed by the 599 and the V12 Lussos. All of the models though are priced relatively close to each other. If your budget sits between $200,000 and $250,000, you can consider a 599, FF, Lusso and even a high mileage F12. For the A12 you need to bring a lot more money to the table. At least $380,000 for the superfast and $600,000 for the GTS. And this means that the top of the GTS market overlaps with the 599 GTO market. The F12 TDF is clearly the most expensive of the bunch. Now most of these prices changed quite a lot since last summer. If you watched my market update videos, you know that prices for most cars decreased. Rates fluctuate around 7%, but there are outliers on the negative and the positive side. Most V12 Ferraris decreased approximately by 7%, but the 599 and F12 rank on the positive side when compared to the market. Prices seem to be immune to the market trend. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are also some emerging risks that we need to look at. Over here we have the price trends for the F12 and 599. And we can clearly see that prices have been stable in the F12 market and even been increasing in the 599 market. Starting at the top with the F12, we can see that prices are identical to those of 1 year ago. And this makes it a unique development, as most prices decreased. That's great news if you're an owner. However, it might have been at the expense of the increase rate. With 23.7%, it is on the low side. Transitioning to the 599, we can see that the trend is more volatile, and this results from the low supply. We can also see that the price actually continued to increase during the last year. They're up by 9.2% or $17,000. Yet, the increase is not statistically confirmed, so this means that it could be the result of chance. What is confirmed though is the 44.6% or $62,500 increase since October 2020. Now besides having strong price trends that deviate from the rest of the market, these two cars also have supply trends that differ significantly from the trends that we can see in the rest of the car markets. Over here we can see that supply plummeted when prices soared, and this is the same as in the rest of the market. However, most other sports and supercars saw supply levels increase during last year. Many are even back at their pre-pandemic level, but that clearly doesn't apply here. Supply is almost at the same level as in September 2021. And of course, this might have helped to keep prices high. So in many ways, the 599 and F12 markets are quite similar. Price trends are strong and the supply is relatively low compared to the end of 2020. But there's an important difference when it comes to the market segments that pushed prices up. In the F12 market, prices shifted up for all cars by approximately the same extent. In the 599 market though, it are especially the low mileage cars that are responsible for the price increase. Let's have a look. Over here we have the price development in the 599 market, split by the mileage buckets. And this reveals that the cars in the two buckets with the lowest mileage saw the largest increase. The orange and blue line represent the cars with a mileage between 0 and 7,600 miles and 7,600 and 11,700 miles. And you can see that these segments increased more than the two other ones. The high mileage segment still increased, just by a lower amount. Now this pattern in which low mileage cars increased more than high mileage cars is not unique to the 599 market. It's a typical pattern for collectible cars. Last week we saw for example the same in the 996 and 997 manual turbo market. So this pattern underlines that the 599 is becoming or is a collectible car. But now then, there are also some emerging risks, especially in the 599 market. You see, these cars aren't selling very quickly, and this could be an indication that the price trend will weaken in the future. Unfortunately, we cannot measure exactly how long it takes for a dealer to sell a 599, but we can look at a proxy, the time that is listed for sale. This listing time analysis is based on data from Autotempest. Autotempest conveniently pulls listings from a bunch of different websites into one place so that you can browse through all of them. Check out the links in the description to find the F12s and 599s for sale right now. So without further ado, let's have a look at the numbers. Over here we can see the average listing times for the 599 and F12s. We start with the most worrying trend, that is, if you own a 599 and care about values. The average listing time for a 599 is 92 days. That's quite long, but maybe not the most important aspect of this data. We can namely see that the listing times dropped rapidly when prices soared. They dipped at 40 days in the end of 2021, but have been increasing ever since. At the moment, it takes more than 100 days to sell a 599, and that's long compared to other cars. The trend over here is similar to many other markets, but most of them have a price trend that is negative, while the trend in the 599 market is up or flat. So this means that there is a significant risk that the price trend is flat because the cars are not selling. The data behind the price trend itself backs up much of the listing time numbers. In the beginning of 2022, only 10% of the cars were still listed for sale after 3 months, but this number increased to roughly 40 to 50% during 2022. It's interesting though that throughout 2022, prices for cars that were not sold after 3 months increased by approximately 8%, but that this trend stopped now. Dealers are no longer increasing the prices for cars that are already in their inventory. Now if we change our focus to the F12, we can see that the situation is a bit less risky over there. Listing times increased during last year, but much less severe than in the 599 market. On average though, an F12 is still listed for 2 months. Looking at the prices for the cars that are not sold after 3 months, we can see that the price is lowered by 1 to 2%. But now then, after all of those graphs and numbers, I think it's a good idea to make a little summary before looking at the other V12 models. Prices for 599 and F12s remained stable or even increased during last year, and this is unique. Most car prices decreased, so by owning a 599 or F12, you would have been relatively immune to the market correction. However, we saw that there are some emerging risks in the 599 market. The listing time increased considerably, and this might cause prices to move down. The same applies to the F12, but to a lesser extent. But the V12 market is of course larger than the 599 and the F12, so let's have a look at the price trends for the Lusso, FF and A12. Over here we have the price trend for the FF, and this is immediately a tricky one. Supply has been as low as 14 cars, and this increased the trend's volatility. Therefore, I wouldn't rely too much on the median prices. The confidence intervals though do show the long-term trend. And this trend is concave. Prices increased between October 2020 and the end of 2021, were flat in the first half of 2022 and have been decreasing during the second half. The median price decreased by 14.3%, and this is roughly in line with the rest of the market. We can really see an increase in the decrease rate. The same applies to the V12 Lusso. Compared to the market top in April, prices decreased by 11.4%. This though follows from a 15.9% or $38,400 increase, so long-term owners are still looking at a decent plus. Most likely though, values will dive quite soon under the ones of September 2020. There's no sign that this market is bottoming. Supply in the V12 Lusso market developed very much in line with the market supply. It decreased rapidly from 40 to 11 cars between September 2020 and April 2022. It then started to increase when prices stopped. Currently there are 26 cars listed for sale. And with that we move on to the last car, the A12. Over here we have the price trends for the GTS and the Superfasts. Starting with the Superfast, we can see that prices increased by 19.5% between July 2021 and April 2022. But like many other markets, prices stopped. Compared to April, they are down by 7.4% or $57,000. And this basically applies to the complete market, so all model years and both low and high mileage cars. It's not too bad though. Compared to 1 year ago, they are still up by 3.7%. And with this amount, the A12 Superfast belongs to a minor group of cars for which the year-on-year price change is still positive. And you can click over here if you want to see the year-on-year price change for other cars. Moving on to the GTS, we can see that prices appear to be relatively stable. But this trend is a bit misleading. An increasing supply of 2020 cars kept the median price relatively high. In reality, 2021 cars have been decreasing since April and are now down by approximately 8.5%. 2022 cars basically immediately came down and decreased by roughly 8%. If we have a quick look at the supply levels, we can see that the Superfast followed the market pattern. A big decrease was followed by an increase. After the increase, supply stabilized at 67 to 70 cars, and this stable pattern highlights that the market matured. It also contrasts to the GTS market, in which supply is still increasing. Now before we end the video, we need to talk about one more thing, the median mileage. A12 owners seem to be terrified to drive their cars. Over here we have the median mileage, and we can see that the Superfast that were for sale in January 2022 had a median mileage of 4,500 miles, but this number didn't increase during last year. In the GTS market, we can see that it topped at 1,300 miles during last summer and decreased a bit after that. Both trends are atypical. For normal cars or even other sports cars and supercars like the Porsche GT models, we can see that the median mileage trends up. Perhaps not every 3 months, but definitely over the time horizon of a year. Everybody has an opinion on this matter. Should you be cautious of the mileage that you add? Most people on the internet seem to think this is nonsense, but A12 owners seem to think twice before they add a significant number of miles. And with that, it's time to wrap up and conclude. The F12 and 599 seem to have escaped the market correction, and the keywords over here are seem to. Price trends are stable, but we can see that there are some cracks in the market. Listing times are up and this might eventually be reflected in the prices. Nobody knows what will happen in the future, but the 599 and F12 might belong to a select group of cars that might come through this correction unharmed. Prices for other V12 models like the FF, Lusso and A12 have already been decreasing for a few months now. They appear to have a higher correlation to the market's trend. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would like to see an analysis for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you will find market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.